best entertainment on the earth. Tune in for Comics with Perch.
Hey everybody, this is Perch, and I'm frustrated about kind of how this topic evolves in comics because it feels like there's an opportunity for everybody to take just a basic road of common sense. And then but everyone's like, no, I'm not going to go down that road. I'm going to this road over here with giant potholes and a bridge missing there's been an oil spill, so it's on fire, and there's a guy with a chainsaw running around with some kind of ski mask. Don't know what that's about. I'm taking that road. That's the road for me. Comic sales are not as deeply mysterious as people let on. It often feels like there's a really obvious, simple answer in front of everyone's face. But instead, it's we take these bizarre turns that open up arguments and fighting for no good reason. So the fundamental truth of comic sales, are you ready, for the past 50, 60 years or so, is simply this. If the story contained within the comic is compelling with good art, and it's priced at a reasonable level, it will sell well. If it utilizes a popular character and utilizes that character well, it will sell a bit more. If it's a character nobody has heard of and has been poorly marketed or messaged, it will sell worse. If it takes a dramatic turn or change of personality or team makeup or whatever it happens to be, and it's not one that the customer base likes, it will sell worse. You can see this play out with the X-Men, and the X-Men, the Uncanny X-Men, is perhaps one of the best ways to look at comic sales over decades, because you have runs with popular artists, John Byrne, Mark Silvestri, Jim Lee, Joe Mad, others who have come onto that book and driven sales. That takes care of the good art part. You have times when Chris Claremont is on that book, driving powerful storylines people like, and it sells well. Then you have times when Chris Claremont, changes the team up right about the time that the X-Men were in Australia, and they went through the Siege Perilous, and Storm was a child, and then there was this faux X-Men team that included Moira and Strong Guy and Forge running around on Muir Island. The sales didn't do well during that period. It was a combination of a lot of fill-in artists during that moment. This is before Jim Lee was really coming onto the book. There were several that were new. Again, not a bad artist, just wasn't what people were used to. And the team was not a popular team for that period of time. And, miracle upon miracles, it didn't sell as well. Then if you go further forward in time and you look at the different runs, the Grant Morrison run, the Joss Whedon run, all these different eras of X-Men, Kieran Gillen, Matt Fraction, Brubaker, kind of for a half second, all these different runs of the X-Men, you will see pretty consistently that when the story catches the reader's attention, it sells well. Now, in other news, water is wet. So this is where it's somewhat aggravating. If you look at the X-Men history, you will see several moments where the X-Men team is, it does all the things that we hear about today. It's diverse. You've got a black woman who's leading the team and doesn't even have powers for a portion of a very successful selling run. Does great. The key there is not that a black woman was running the team. The key there was the art was strong, the story was strong, it was compelling, people bought it. That's why it worked. That's why it sold. In other news, water is wet. None of these things are miraculous. So today we get to, a current kind of debate. Well, I mean, it's not just today, it's constantly. We get to these debates about what's going on in comic sales. And I did a video a week ago that got a lot of traction because a lot of articles picked it up and they used it. And in many cases, they used it to prove different points than the one I was making. And so I want to take us back to the original point. The video was basically talking about the fact that DC had selling titles. And I stressed this several times in the video. I noticed that piece didn't make it into the articles and other things that were written. Maybe For those people who are willing to jump on it, you could do an article on this. But DC is not in dire straits in terms of sales if you're purely going by the numbers. They have books in the top 100. It's fine. However, at this current moment, Marvel has widened the share between DC sales and Marvel sales. This, again, is not an opinionated statement. It's not a controversial statement. It is a statement of numbers and facts. Marvel and DC, the gap has widened, and DC is the number 2, not the number 1. Again, that's not a terribly unusual situation over the last 20 years or so. The reasoning and the purpose of that video that I said was terrifying, and I still maintain is terrifying, and I say that because as a manager of a portfolio, and again, I said this before, you should have a diversified portfolio. When I say diversified, I mean many different types of. I do not mean racially or gender-wise. I mean you have a number of different bets. I use the analogy of a stock portfolio where you do not want to put all your money into one particular industry. They talk about diversifying your portfolio. That means covering your risk. It also means placing more bets because you don't know how those bets are going to pull off. Right now at DC, and if you look at the ICV2 numbers, you can read by the way the numbers a couple different ways. You could see a more dramatic picture, which is what I talked about. And then now that there's some other things that they factored in there, and you can take a digital into account if you want, and you can also read the numbers in a different way, also based on how things are being counted. You can get somewhere between almost 30, I think high 20s, 29, 30, or 48 of the top 50 DC comics are Batman or Batman adjacent. What does adjacent mean in this case? Well, things like Dark Knights of Steel. That we're calling that Batman adjacent. Is that fair? I mean, I don't know. You could argue either way. Yeah, in the end, it really doesn't matter because, and this is the key point, anywhere on that spectrum of 30-ish to 48 is terrifying for a company that's putting out 80 books a month. Again, by math, if it's on the low end, let's just use 30. If it's 30, that's greater than 1/3 of the books that a company is producing. A company that has many different media properties, many different IP characters, 1/3 are Batman. And again, how you count Batman gets funny. Obviously, Batman Detective Comics, those are Batman titles. All right, if we're going to a World's Finest type book, or Superman Batman. Can we count Batman Superman as Batman? I would, but whatever. You can make your own choices, but the point remains the same. DC is far too leveraged on Batman. And in other news, water is wet. This is not a controversial statement. You can hear it from Jimmy Palmiotti is saying the same thing. Lots of people are saying the same thing. If you go into a retail shop, they will tell you the same thing. There's too much Batman. Now, like I pointed out in the video, and this is a very important distinction people have to understand, is DC is selling Batman. Those comics are selling. So that presents an interesting conundrum for DC. They want to make money. They want to continue to sell books off the shelves. And so they go in further and further and further on Batman because Batman is what's moving. Now, if you're an accountant, you might say, yeah, that's the right thing to do. Go where the money is. Print more Batman. However, any good accountant, any good forecaster, any good risk analysis person would tell you that's dangerous. The more you do that, the more you risk oversaturation of Batman, and then things tip over. And then suddenly Batman, the thing that you're relying on, has a 20% drop, and that is catastrophic for your sales. And it is. That's not hyperbole. 20% of your sales going away basically removes your profit. In a lot of cases, that would be very bad for that to happen. Now, Tom Taylor, because of all these articles that I guess spawned from my video, I have, who knows? Again, it's hard to say they spawned from my video when several of the articles wildly misinterpreted what was being said. And I don't think they're idiots. I have to believe that was intentional. But Taylor stepped in to kind of defend his John Kent Superman book because he's like, no, it's selling incredibly well. Well, okay, It did. I think if you look at the full run of his book, issues 1, 2, 3 were not selling as well. Then people came back and they reprinted once the news of John Kent being bisexual came out. So this is, again, one of those things that doesn't need to be controversial, but it gets made controversial. The getting made controversial is because people, they're tying in the bisexual fact as the key sticking point in the whole topic. But this argument holds up if you take it away. Just forget about that for a moment. Don't let that be a distraction. You have a character, relatively new character, John Kent. When I say relatively new, I mean this iteration of John is less than 5 years old. Okay? We had a character changing moment that got some mainstream media publicity. Okay? It doesn't matter what the thing was that changed. I mean, it may to other arguments, but not to this one. It doesn't really matter because the key question is, will interest hold from this moment or not? It is undeniable, and Taylor's correct. People saw the news about this change to John Kent, and they bought the comic, and they went back and they reprinted some issues, and they bought more comics, and sales for that held. However, early indications, that those sales are not holding up. And by the way, it's early, so that may turn out not to be true, in fairness, but history tells us it will be true. Because every time, and when I say every time, I literally mean every time, as in 100% of the time when you look at sales, if you have a big moment in a comic book, be it a death, a marriage, you saw this with Spider-Man, you've seen it with deaths with half of the comics that have come out, a radical team change, or yes, a gender swap, race swap, sexual alteration for the character change. Whenever those have happened and they've got mainstream news, people come in, they buy that copy of the comic, and then sales settle back down. Usually, and I've shown lots of trends now, it is an unarguable fact that the sales almost always, the two exceptions are Walking Dead and weirdly some of the X-Men books and what they've done, but those are the only two. The sales after these big media promoted events ultimately go back to where they were before the event. Don't turn this into a woke or bisexual or anything. That becomes a distraction to this argument. It's always that way. The real question is not will it do it, but how fast will it do it? Will it go back to the original numbers in 2 issues, 5 issues, 6 issues, 12 issues? The average that we've seen over the last 10 years is 6 issues. If you go 20 years back, it was closer to 12. Things are accelerating. Probably not surprising with the pace at which comics are coming out, the reboots and the cancellations that constantly happen, and the overall price of comics. Probably not a surprise. So, it is not an insult to Taylor. It is not a refutation of woke or anything else to say John Kent Superman is likely going to drop back down to the levels prior to the kiss. That is a non. Again, this isn't a controversial statement. It's based on history. It's based on facts. Now, can Taylor change that up, do something different, make it so that isn't the case? He might. I mean, anything is possible. If he is able to pull it off, then he should be recognized as somebody who has who's basically done something that hasn't been done before in any kind of frequency. It will be miraculous for him to pull that off. More power to him if he can. I'm sure a lot of retailers, I'm sure DC, I'm sure a lot of people would love for him to be able to do it. I also do not think he needs to get as defensive as he's currently getting about what he's done or where the current sales are. For God's sake, stop bringing up digital when digital continues to be 10% or so of the sales. The numbers and the history speak for itself. Bring that up is not being a dick. It's not trolling. It's not being bigoted. It's none of those things. It is just history. Hey, defy the odds. We're rooting for you. Go for it. That's how I look at this. I think taking it back to the original premise, and I stand by this. And again, this is a water is wet kind of argument. I think anyone who gets in to really argue this fact, I have a hard time believing that A, you're serious, or B, maybe you were dropped on your head as a child. Having more than a third of your books, your total publishing output, somewhere between a third to more than half of your total publishing line of sales all be Batman is a dangerous long-term move. I defy anyone. How can you take that statement and bring that into the culture war? It is not a culture war argument. It is a basic risk analysis argument. I'm not saying you should stop publishing Batman. I'm saying that you really, 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 from a strategic standpoint, need to look at Superman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, The Flash, the Justice League, everything else. You need to look at those titles, and you need to put in some effort there of how you bring those up. Because no good manager, nobody in their right mind would say it is healthy for so much of your company's output to be driving the total amount of sales. That is basically all of us wishing for us to get unemployed in the near future because things change. I hate so much that this has been turned into the kind of silly bullshit that always goes on the internet, which, again, everybody's participating with. And Taylor, I appreciate him coming in to defend his book and want to say, look, I'm doing these kinds of sales. But he should know this just as well as everyone. All of this stuff is incredibly disingenuous to go, la, 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 no, but my stuff is fine. Come on. This is a risk. You do not need to portray it like, the world is coming into an end tomorrow. But again, it's terrifying for this to be the output. It is from any retail. And by the way, the retailers are the ones who are buying these comics from the publishers and then selling them to customers. How about we talk to more retailers? How about that? I talk to retailers every chance I can get. I'm in multiple groups. I go into shops. If there is one consistent message that has been given over the last year, it's, holy shit, there's too much Batman. And this is scary for us. We are limiting our orders on DC accordingly. Consistently, that's the message that comes from the people who are selling your books. So, again, we can all pretend those people don't exist, the people who are actually, buying and selling, or we can start getting to a place where, we start listening to common sense, like water is wet, because this is a water is wet kind of argument. The fact that everybody argues about this is dumb. This is not an argument. Should not be an argument. Come on. Anyway, I'm baffled at how the internet and our current kind of culture and everything. I'm baffled at how really adept we are at taking obvious things, obvious, completely uncontroversial things, and turning them into bizarre arguments for just no point whatsoever. Who in their right mind would sign up to say, yeah, okay, I'll take a crack at this. I enjoyed debate in high school, so I'm gonna go all in with making an argument that being completely overloaded on Batman titles is a great idea and we should continue it. What the hell? Thanks for listening.